Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Enauta's video conference call to discuss second quarter 2024 earnings. Before we begin the presentation, I would like to make some important announcements. This event is being broadcast live with simultaneous translation into English. The presentation is available for download at Enauta's IR website, as well as here on the webcast platform. After the presentation, there will be a Q&A session. To ask a question, please use the Q&A button of the platform on the bottom of your screen. If you prefer to ask a question in writing, please do so by writing your name, company, and the question in the Q&A field. If you prefer to ask a live question, just write your name and company in the Q&A. Before proceeding, let me mention that forward-looking statements that might be made during this conference call relative to Enauta's business perspectives, projections, and operating and financial goals are based on the beliefs and assumptions of Enauta's management and on information currently available to the company. Forward-looking statements are not a guarantee of performance. They involve risks, uncertainties, and assumptions as they relate to future events and therefore depend on circumstances that may or may not occur. Investors should understand that general economic conditions, industry conditions, and other operating factors can significantly affect the future performance of Enauta and can cause results to differ materially from those expressed in such forward-looking statements. Today with us, we have our CEO, Décio Oddone, our Chief Financial and Investor Relations Officer, Pedro Medeiros, and our Chief Operating Officer, Carlos Mastrangelo. I would like to turn the floor now to Enauta's management to start the presentation. Please, you may begin. Good day, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us in this call. I'd like to start apologizing for the slight delay. We had some difficulties, IT difficulties, to have the presentation on the call. That's why we are slightly delayed. This was an interesting quarter for Enauta with many achievements. We significantly progressed in the Atlanta project. For a while, we've been saying now that we would be prepared to start in August, and along this quarter, we advanced a lot in the full development, anchoring the FPSO Atlanta at location, installing the risers and lines, and Mastrangelo will show a video and will explain the progress of Atlanta as scheduled. We had a good production in the early production system. We stopped the Petrogel, which is the vessel in the EPS, for maintenance, and we decided to prolong these maintenance shutdowns to perform additional service that will allow us, if necessary, to have Petrogel in production for longer. So that's a backup. It restarted production normally in the end of July. We advanced in the deal with 3R Petroleum. We made an offer at the beginning of the second quarter, and along this quarter, we were able to advance with our negotiations, and today we have the closing date of the agreements. Starting tomorrow, the companies will start operating in a combined way. This will be a great transformation in the life of Enauta. This will be the last video conference call as Enauta, isolatedly. We had some positive financial results, and later Pedro will detail this, but EBITDA was about $290 million, $380 million, adjusted for non-recurring items. And EBITDA, net debt over EBITDA last 12 months ratio remained at 0.8%, and cash flow at $41 million. We have a video that will show the progress of the operations of Atlanta. I'll ask Mastrangelo to comment on the video and to speak about the schedule of the project. Mastrangelo? Thank you, Décio. We'll show a video. We have an association between the plan and the actual. Same video we showed in the steering committee in a meeting with the partnering companies in 2022, when we had approval of the project. We didn't have the reality, we didn't have the equipment to show. So we prepared a 3D video telling a story of how things would unfold until August of 2024. In this video, yeah, back then, at that moment, we weren't sure that we would be able to extend the life of Protogel to give us the resilience needed. So this video combines the 3D video, the planned, with the reality, with what actually happened. A lot of synchrony between the plan and what actually happened. This is the installation of the Christmas tree. And the relocation from well 3H to well 5H to start production, early production at well 5H. We were able to bring the production forward. During this same campaign, we decided to have an exploratory campaign at Atlanta Northeast, and this was successful. About 200 million barrels of oil in place. We're also working to bring forward production at phase 2 of Atlanta. This is the Sapura Onyx vessel that went to location with all the equipment needed to install the subsea system. And as planned in the past, we can start production without stopping production of Petrogel 1 because it is at a cluster more towards the south. This is the real image of location of the two FPSOs already installed. The first Petrogel in production. Very similar between the plan and the actual. We have the start of production. We started to remove the wells from Petrogel to take it to the north and connect them to FPSO Atlanta. This is the installation of the multi-phase pump, the MPP. It's equivalent to a building of almost 7 stories. It's installed, and we're now at a phase of commissioning and test for startup. The subsea campaign is happening with the subsea commissioning and the final testing. The whole installation is complete, and we are now at a commissioning and testing phase of the full development of Atlanta. On the slide, on the top line, we have the plan when we had approval of the project, and at the bottom, the actual, what actually happened in perfect synchrony. As you can see, we had the pre-anchoring campaign, which was actually done a little earlier to take advantage of the vessels that were already in a drilling campaign. To date, our budget is below the planned budget that we had in the beginning of the project. And like I said, July was the month of interconnections. Installation of the FPSO, the hookup, the connecting of the lines and risers, all of that happened uneventfully. No setbacks, it was 100% success. And if you know this kind of activity, there is normally a lot of headache. There are delays, but we didn't have any of that. And now, for the next month, we would have start of production. We need to get approvals from IBAMA and authorization from ANP, the Petroleum Agency. As regards IBAMA, we have no conditions pending. We should be calling them in the coming weeks for an on-board visit, and we're not expecting any setbacks. Regarding ANP, given the strike, that tends to delay responses and the acceptance of the remaining pending conditions. Well, if everything goes well, if we didn't have this strike, well, the strike can get a little in the way, but other than that, we would have first oil flowing in August with no difficulties whatsoever. Now I turn the floor to Pedro to continue presenting our financial results.
Good morning, everyone. Now we're going to talk about the results of the second quarter in further detail. On this table, we show the highlights of the quarter and the main financial items, indicators of financial leverage and cash equivalents of the company. Results were positive, even though they were compromised by a downtime of at least 27 days this quarter in the production of FPSO Petrojarl 1 and EPS in Atlanta, and also maintenance of Manati, full downtime. According to the operator, we expect this to be resumed in the third quarter. In addition, results also had some non-recurring items associated to the long journey of management of portfolio, capital, and new investments by the company, discussing tax liabilities with positive reversals or even agreements that led to payments by Enauta with Petrobras, and they led to non-recurring items of 88 million reais. And here we highlight total EBITDAX recurring for the quarter of 380 million reais. Next slide, please. Starting with production, here we show a highlight of the journey for the last 12 months. Last year, the company resumed Petrojarl 1 after an upgrade, a successful upgrade in the pumping system, subsea pumping system. Very consistent operation of the quarter. We had preventive maintenance downtime in order to include some safety items. And like Décio mentioned, we also have an option to extend the operation of Petrojarl by year-end, should this be necessary and timely. Now we resumed our EPS in Atlanta at full capacity for the last days of July, a recent change, last Friday actually. Here we highlight production for July 29 in the early production system with more than 24,000 barrels of oil equivalent per day, and the contribution of the deal in progress of Parque das Conchas, considering that our working interest acquired would show total production of 6,000 barrels equivalents per day in most recent days. Next slide, please. Moving now to profitability of the company, we also highlight maintenance of full diligence in cost management and execution of Atlanta project. The second quarter, in light of the downtime for maintenance in Petrojarl, we highlight here a reduction of total charter paid this quarter with our main supplier of the equipment. And a comparison, considering the level of operating leverage brought by the new Atlanta system, a cost base expected, at least considering charter, maintenance, and operation of FPSO, compared to the EPS. In this case, currently, charting cost of Petrojarl is around $165,000 per day, and the agreement with the supplier of FPSO Atlanta around $264,000 per day. However, a deduction coming from funding by Enauta to the platform, which will be posted at financial revenue of $115,000 $100,000 per day, leading to operating costs in the agreement as the investment was performed, magnitude of $159,000 per day. The difference being that our capacity will be 50,000 barrels per day once we deliver a ramp-up production. This should be converted into a significant increase in the margin of the company. Next slide. Moving now to cash flow and performance of investments in Atlanta Oliva, the quarter considered an increase in investments, or the rate of total investment this quarter vis-à-vis the last quarter, reflecting exclusively the progress in the installation campaign, connection of the wells and FPSO lines, and the completion of delivery of most equipment necessary to perform the project as a whole, including the 6 wells expected for Phase 1 of Atlanta. On the right-hand side chart, this is an update of expected investment for year 2024. We highlight total contingency included in this investment. Vis-à-vis, we're getting closer to all the operating steps, and day after day, performance is as expected, and we're becoming more confident that we'll be achieving these contingencies in total investment. Next slide. Just to conclude our financial highlights. When it comes to the second quarter, this is the second quarter in a row of expansion of a positive net cash flow, free cash flow for the company. Here we highlight free cash flow in the quarter of $41 million. Going forward, we expect to have a return or resumption of EPS in Atlanta production to positively contribute to the earnings of the third quarter. We expect to have full stability of the working capital line and a conclusion of financing, long-term financing associated to FPSO Atlanta, owing to delivery and anchoring in Q3. These are important points to consider when we consider the performance and possibility to increase the company's cash in the coming quarters. Now, when you look at the balance sheet, this quarter was also full of important movements. They include the issuance of 2 new incentivized domestic bonds in the market. Both had a strong demand, allowing the company to significantly lower the average capital cost and also extending the amortization debt profile, considering the deadline of both issuance of 6 and 10 years in a different format compared to different issuance. Here we highlight the second quarter reporting, the company showing a balance sheet with cash equivalent, adjusted cash equivalent, which is pretty high. We're speaking of more than $1.3 billion. If we add cash, financial investments, receivable credit long-term associated to FPSO Atlanta, and also total funding invested in the abandonment fund of Manatee with the operator with $55 million. The total amount, in an order of magnitude, exceeds the company's current market cap, a very extended profile of amortizations, which will allow to achieve a collection of synergies expected in the deal with 3R. Liability asset management very strongly in the second half of the year. Just to conclude, here is a map of events expected for the coming quarters when it comes to Enauta's management, and also a couple of highlights presented in the second quarter. Going forward, we expect to see the final replacement in the agenda of efficiency in the company's balance sheet, in which will be replacing the abandonment fund of Manatee by financial collateral, leading the $55 million and converting them in cash equivalent, new cash equivalent to the company. Liability management will be short-term in the light of new investments, so we expect to reducing and extending the capital cost. Like Décio mentioned, we expect to conclude today the integration with 3R, the last highlight of our earnings. Like my colleague said before, we expect to begin to deliver FPSO Atlanta production as planned on schedule in August. As a result of the new production, we want to bring a new proposal in the way we can commercialize Atlanta's oil and conclude the deals in Uruguatambaú, Parque das Conchas, and a new partner in Atlanta Field. Now I give the floor back to Décio, who will talk more about Enauta and 3R.
We spoke about in previous events that the creation of a combined company of Enauta plus 3R creates scale and diversification. The companies will be bigger, among the largest and most diversified independent oil and gas companies. Our portfolio will be more diversified and more resilient to cycles and investments in our industry. And I'm going to show you, we'll have the ability to generate a significant amount in synergies, operational, commercial, financial, and capital allocation synergies. Pedro has mentioned that we have been working at Enauta to reduce the cost of capital. We believe that the potential of this combined business will allow us to reduce that even further. We'll have an opportunity to develop new ventures. The company will have a much more diversified portfolio than we had at Enauta, which was more concentrated, and will leverage competitive advantages in a market which is clearly undergoing consolidation. We have a diversified reference shareholders base with potential to join global indices. And we will have the ability to have adequate capital allocation, considering payment of dividends and future growth expectations for the company. Next slide, please. Very quickly, this is what we see in terms of synergies in the deal. Synergies related to our debt, liability management, cost reduction, optimization, so we can have an operating campaigns, and the commercialization and sale of oil, natural gas, oil byproducts when we combine production of both companies. This company has a great diversification of risks, the potential for growth and new businesses. The company will be more attractive in our relationship with the third-party suppliers, particularly in offshore operations, where we have long lead times and delivery times. You have a greater potential of attracting and retaining talents at this company that is, in our opinion, doomed to be a great success. And lastly, before we move to the questions, I know we can have a lot of questions. This is about our shareholders base, a diversified shareholders base with a high free float. It will allow us, as I mentioned before, to join global indices. Enauta Participações will be part of the new 3R. This is what we had to share with you. I'd like to thank you for monitoring and joining Enauta since we went public in 2009, and we hope to remain partners in this new organization that will start operating tomorrow. Thank you very much. We will now start the Q&A session for investors and analysts. If you wish to ask a question live, please type your name and company in the Q&A field. If you would like your question to be read out, please type your name, your company, and the question. Our first question comes from Luiz Carvalho with UBS. Please go ahead, Mr. Carvalho. Hello. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Still in the morning. Well, for starters, I'd like to congratulate you on closing or almost closing And for somebody following the company since the IPO, I am very happy to see that there is a very promising next step. So good luck in this new phase. I would like to perhaps ask a couple of questions. First, regarding synergies. You showed a very interesting slide that you had detailed before about each one of the verticals of those $1.2 billion that you expect to capture with the new company, the new structure. Perhaps you could give us a little more color regarding the timeline of these processes. I mean, what synergies can we expect along 2024 and 2025? That would be interesting. My second question is about the full development of Atlanta. We know that some public agencies are in an operation a little out of the ordinary, both ANP and IBAMA. So I'd like to know how's the plan going? You mentioned that ANP uh, will will be giving you the licenses 2 weeks before, but if there's a delay, is there a plan B? How should we see this? And if I may, one last question. If you could give us an update on M&As, Uruguay, Tambaú, and Parque das Conchas. There's something related to the abandonment of Parque das Conchas. Are you considering Peregrino? There was recent news about that case. So perhaps if you could give us an update on the M&A activities, that would be much appreciated. Thank you. Thank you, Luis. Thank you for the congrats. Indeed, I think the Enauta technical team did a good work at Atlanta. It is not easy to deliver a production development project in deep waters on schedule and on time, especially for an independent company. I think Enauta was the first one to actually achieve that. So Mr. Angelo and his team are to be congratulated. We are very satisfied with the results. And I will start answering regarding the regulatory agency. Well, as you mentioned, we're practically ready to operate. We just need the operating license from IBAMA and the authorization from ANP, which are necessary from the regulatory standpoint. As regards IBAMA, we don't expect any complications. We just have to have their final visit to the facilities, to the FPSO, for them to issue the operating license. And we believe that this will happen along the month of August. ANP has a process that requires authorizations. And what is happening is that they are in a out of the ordinary operation. They're taking 30 days to respond to any request from the industry. If that is over, we can have it in August. If they continue with this out of the ordinary operation, we might have some delay. You asked about a plan B. Well, our plan B is Petrojarl. We always planned for that since the beginning, and Mastrangelo actually mentioned that when presenting the video. We wanted to extend the lifespan of Petrojarl 1. That was the goal, to have a backup system. Thinking about maintenance of production, considering a regulatory setback or operational setback. Thank God, no operational setbacks, but we still have a regulatory challenge ahead. It's something that we do not have control over. In June, when we had the downtime, it was going to be just a couple of days to make some adjustments at Petrojarl and some of the lines, but we decided to extend the maintenance downtime so that Petrojarl would continue to be an option, or plan B, to maintain production until year end. And that's what we did. We spent a little longer in the maintenance, but now we have more safety. If we have an issue, we'll have a backup until the end of the year. So that's plan B. I'll ask Pedro to ask about synergies, but before that, I'll comment on M&As. Peregrino is not in our radar. Uruguay, Tambaú, we decided not to acquire the FPSO, but we continue to talk with Petrobras regarding the acquisition of the two fields. And for Parque das Conchas, we are at a final stage of conversation with the other consortium members, Shell and ONGC, regarding the guarantees. But this is moving ahead fast. So we expect the deal to have closing as scheduled, as Pedro mentioned, more towards the end of the year. And I'll ask Pedro to speak about the synergies, so I won't be the only one talking all the time. Thank you, Luis, for the question. As you can see, we tried to divide this into 4 synergy pillars. The total estimate includes a very detailed action plan that has been agreed on and presented as part of the approval of the deal by the board of directors of both companies. The management of both companies have been working relentlessly in seeking synergies and delivering these synergies. The main pillar, estimate of $1.2 billion, is linked to what we call capital allocation. This involves both the format of business combination and integration, where Nota Participações is integrated to 3R originally. This will allow us to accelerate the recovery of a number of tax assets. And number 2, we have just completed 2 domestic bond issuances that were quite significant and enhanced and strengthened our balance sheet, which is now very solid and liquid. And the driver behind these issuances is to have adequate liability management with the new integrated company, starting in the coming days. So when we speak about timing of achieving those capital allocation synergies, well, it's going to happen fast. I would say that the probability that we'll fully achieve those synergies along the next months, still in 2024, is quite high. If we look at the other categories, operating costs and investments, the company is already working to implement and deliver a good part of these synergies. The action plan is drafted, and it will be starting the execution as of tomorrow. Some of them are linked to the decision to invest in phase 2 of Atlanta and the potential implementation of Oliva and the expected campaigns for the offshore area, Papa-Terra, Peroá, and Malombe. From that standpoint, I would say that in terms of timing, the likelihood is that we'll be able to materially deliver the synergies expected in terms of operating costs and investments in the next 6 to 12 months. At the commercial level, that's a synergy that should take a little longer to be delivered. Both companies today work with midterm contracts, partnerships, and associations. And I would say that the expectation would be to have those delivered in 12 to 24 months. But it is a category that is contributing the least to these $1.2 billion. I hope I have helped. If I may ask a follow-up question, I'm not sure it's addressed to you or Décio in terms of capital allocation. Given the timeline of the synergies you mentioned, how should we think about the dividend policy of the new company? Because you're going to have a balance sheet that will be quite comfortable in terms of cash, well, considering that these synergies do come forward. If you could give us some color on that, it would be interesting. Luis, the board of the new company will meet for the first time tomorrow. It's going to be a meeting to focus on legal issues, but that's an important discussion we'll have in the beginning of the new company. We expect to have this decided very soon. Okay, thank you very much. Congratulations one more time and good luck.
Next question, Leonardo Marcondes with Bank of America. Please go ahead. Hello, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Décio, Pedro, Mastrangelo. Thank you for taking my questions. I have two questions. First question is about M&A, this time more focus on a specific asset. I'd like to know how you consider the acquisition of Uruguá Tambaú now that you decided to discontinue the FPSO acquisition. So do you still consider to be interesting buying these fields? And what are the alternatives you are considering in order to work on them? My second question is for Mastrangelo, benefiting from his presence with us. What is your vision about Papa-Terra? Could you tell us more about the qualities and the challenges behind this field? It would be very useful for us. Thank you. Thank you for being with us and for your questions. We are having conversations with Petrobras with the potential maintenance of this deal to buy Uruguá Tambaú fields. We're analyzing and we haven't come to any decision yet. We do expect to have it concluded for the next 6 months. No news yet about this question. And over to Mastrangelo to talk about Papa-Terra. For the moment, this is Enauta's conference call. So let me add to what he talked about synergies. In Enauta, right now, we are working in order to move forward with Oliva's project, which is Oliva's early production system, and phase 2 of Atlanta, considering the area in the northeast, and 2 additional wells in Atlanta. When Pedro mentioned operational synergies, these gains are immediate. Décio said that tomorrow will be the first board meeting of the new board. And there is the synergy to work on only a single campaign for drilling purposes. For instance, in Brazil, the cost for the mobilization of a drilling rig is very high. You have to pay for mobilization, demobilization, hull cleaning, which is very, very high. And the more you dilute these fixed costs for a single campaign, that's an immediate benefit. Papa-Terra has a huge oil volume, and any increase in the recovery of the oil is tremendous. So there is a potential for it. And leveraging with these synergies and working on multiple campaigns, workovers in Peroá, Oliva, Maropé, Atlanta, the benefit is immediate, like I said, in applications and leveraging all the activities. So before we get started, well, that's all we can say right now. Thank you. Crystal clear, but if I may, just a follow-up question about Uruguá Tambaú. So far today, no alternatives for an FPSO considered by yourselves, right? Nothing along those lines? Like I said before, we are considering alternatives available to develop the field without FPSO Cidade dos Santos. Clear, thank you. Thank you. Next question, Rodrigo Almeida with Santander. Please go ahead. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would also like to congratulate you on the near closing of the deal with 3R, and also congratulations on full development system in Atlanta. We're almost getting there. So now I'd like to focus on Atlanta, Oliva, and my first question is about how can we consider this rearrangement of connections, considering that we consider Petrojarl, which could be until Q4, but considering that the second set of wells connected to the platform would be those wells coming from Petrojarl. So how can we think about these second pair of wells? Are these the wells that would come later? Just to have a better understanding of the operation in the future months, and also to work on a model and pair it with what will happen, match it to what will happen in Atlanta in the coming months. Still about Atlanta, could you give us more visibility about phase 2, particularly when it comes to Atlanta Northeast? How do you envisage this step? I think we talked about it in the previous call, but any possibility of a new well in the region and maybe an update on Oliva, it would also be interesting. If there is any interesting move in the last months in the project of this final phase of investment. Thank you. Thank you, Rodrigo. We'll try to optimize the operation of Petrojal with FPSO Atlanta. We'll try to do it as efficiently as possible. And Mastrangelo is going to give you more color and also talk about Atlanta and Oliva, phase 2. Thank you, Rodrigo. As we planned before, Atlanta's full development system was designed in a way that gave us a lot of flexibility. Usually all over the world, when you have an EPS, an early production system unit, you remove it for the full development system. In the past, we privileged the possibility to maintain, to keep Petrojal, not to have a significant interruption or downtime in production, which might lead to 8 to 12 months. So we have independent locations. We have full capacity to operate simultaneously both units. Like Décio said, we gave more robustness to have Petrojal potentially by year-end if needed. We hope it's not necessary. So what will happen next? Once we start up Atlanta in August, the vessel that is in charge of subsea installation and connection of the lines in the north area of FPSO Atlanta will consider and catch all pieces of equipment in 2 journeys. Most of the equipment is ready to be loaded for start installation in the south, and well by well will be removed from Petrojal and preparing it to be taken to Atlanta, more to the north. Once we conclude all this campaign to remove the lines and full interruption of downtown at Petrojal conclusion, we would have either decommissioning or what we've been working towards, preparation within 1 year for an extension, a more robust extension to be in the location for 3 years as early production system in Oliva. This adaptation phase and this time to adapt FPSO Petrojal to Oliva is the time necessary for us to buy the lines, to buy the pumps, and drill 2 wells in Oliva, 20 kilometers away from Atlanta. On our schedule, we will start Oliva in early 2027, but this campaign in Oliva is in sync with the campaign of phase 2 of Atlanta. So we have 2 wells in Atlanta, and the same drilling rig that works in the campaign in Oliva would be coming and going with Atlanta to start up slightly afterwards or nearly simultaneously with the other. So this is the current strategy. And the current phase considers a consolidation of our partners who are working with us. Oliva works with a slightly different model, this agreement that minimizes risks and also shared with partnering companies. The intention to have results as quickly as possible. We expect to have the approval of project in Atlanta Oliva, as you saw in the last slide, in the fourth quarter of this year. I think I covered all your questions. What about Petrojarl and the sequence? Maybe you can get into more details. Right. If we assume that we started production in Atlanta, we will try to take Petrojarl's well as quickly as possible in order to have the mobilization in Atlanta. The resilience behind robustness, should we have any problem in a longer strike in the ANP that would postpone production, then in Petrojarl, we have the conditions, for instance, to keep it up and running as much as possible, removing, for instance, the smallest well with lower production and already adapting this well to deliver in Atlanta, in FPSO Atlanta. And with that, we can lead to the total completion of Petrojarl later on. So in this case, the quicker curve in Atlanta would be faster than we anticipate in the transfer from Petrojarl to Atlanta. But that's a flexibility we have, and we might use it or not, depending on how the coming weeks evolve. Perfect. Thank you. Good luck in the new challenges.
Our next question comes from Gabriel Barra with Citi. Go ahead, Mr. Barra. Hello, everyone. Décio, Pedro, Mastrangelo. I will add to the team congratulating you on the deal. I think this was very emblematic. I've been following the company for a long time, and it's quite interesting to see this new path being walked on. Several changes or challenges ahead and several opportunities. I guess that you're going to have a lot in your plate. Many opportunities, a unique opportunity in the Brazilian market. And at the same time, one of the main concerns we have is related to focus. There are many projects, many interesting opportunities in the company that is going to be a cash cow. Now, this was asked regarding dividend policy, capital allocation, etc., but thinking about no restrictions in the service industry, and that you have full capacity to deliver all the projects you want. How should we think about the new company in terms of growth vis-à-vis dividends? Because it seems that there is space for reasonable dividend payout and with growth. So what should be the focus looking forward when we think about inorganic growth as well? So if you could fit all of that into the answer, it would help us understand what the new 3R Enauta company will be like. A second point is regarding execution. It has been said that Mastrangelo is going to be the COO of the company for offshore. And I would like to know whether this is already decided. What's going to be the operational structure of the company? The onshore COO will report to Mastrangelo, two different departments. How this is going to be given the new complexity level, which again will bring you a lot of opportunities, but a lot of complexities and difficulties in execution. And lastly, regarding the contract with Enson, we spoke sometimes about prepayment and perhaps sale of part of that contract for monetization. In this context, in which you're going to generate a lot of cash, perhaps this was a possibility in the past or a need in the past. Perhaps now it doesn't make a lot of sense. So I'd like to hear from you. These are my 3 points. Thank you. Thank you, Gabriel, for the questions. I agree that a diversified portfolio of the combined company is going to allow us to have a much more complex portfolio management than we had at Enauta, where our portfolio was much simpler. And initially, we'll be dedicated to learning more about the portfolio of the combined company. We'll select the projects in which to invest. We'll be very pragmatic about it, respecting capital discipline. And capital allocation will be one of the first discussions with the new board. I don't want to get ahead of myself here and say anything that was not debated in the scope of the new company that has not started operating yet. I know that you have a lot of curiosity. We're also curious, but it is important that we respect the governance and and the new company, the forming of the new company. It will be a company with no controlling shareholder, with no reference shareholder. So this is a discussion we'll need to have as a board to define the dividend policy and or growth. We can clearly see that the company has the ability to pay dividends, the ability to grow as well, and this is what we're going to pursue. You asked about the company's structure. Well, then that is one of the themes that will be deliberated tomorrow in the first board meeting of the new company. What we can say, what is public information, is that we're going to have 4 statutory officers. Myself, Pedro, Mastrangelo, and Pizarro. And we're going to have another officer, FT, responsible for onshore operations, reporting to me because we'll work independently, onshore and offshore. Because we believe that we have to focus on these both on both these activities, but this is still subject to review by the board of directors that will meet tomorrow. As regards the contract with INSEN, I'll turn the floor to Pedro. Hello, Gabriel. Thank you for the question and the congratulations and good wishes. Regarding the structuring or recycling of capital, we continue to look into alternatives. They optimize the use of our balance sheet, having a good capital allocation so that we can continue to create value to our shareholders. It is important to highlight that as a condition precedent for the approval of business combination with 3R, the company organized a general meeting of debenture holders, and among the items of the agenda, there were some restrictions in terms of flexibility of options of the company in routes to recycle capital. These were voted and they were approved, thus widening the array of possibilities that Enauta or the new company can pursue as ways to recycle capital. It is also important to highlight that Enauta has just had 2 recent issuances of incentivized domestic bonds, 6 to 10 years maturities, with a swapped with a swapping. And INSEN also did it recently with a platform for another client in Brazil. And this counted on fees at market levels today superior to the rates and the average cost of capital recently issued by Enauta. So these 2 issuances were fully swapped into dollars. So I haven't got a timing to give you, but as soon as the FPSO starts operating, the company will have this operational asset, an asset that will be in operation, and so we'll start getting the proceeds coming from this funding. So we'll be looking at this topic with a lot of attention in the next 12 months. Thank you, Pedro. Thank you, Décio. Thank you all. Next question from Bruno Amorim with Goldman Sachs. Please go ahead. Hello. Thank you for giving me some space to ask question, and congrats on the deal. I'd like to have a follow-up question regarding the production outlook looking forward. You kind of mentioned the scenario and the alternatives with possible delays in obtaining authorizations from the regulatory agencies. But perhaps you could help us quantify this trajectory from now to the end of the year in the next 12 months. Where do you expect production of the company to be in a scenario with and without IBAMA and ANP resuming their regular pace? So that's my first question, helping us quantify, thinking of Enauta standalone with a focus on Atlanta production outlook by year-end and the next 12 months. My second question is more structural. Mastrangelo kind of commented on phase 2 of Atlanta. Perhaps you could give us more color on Atlanta's phase 2 and when should we start seeing CapEx being invested and impact on production? Thank you. Very well. I'll ask Pedro to speak about production because we're always concerned about a guidance, right? And so I'll ask him to ask this question. Production in the second half of the year. Well, we don't usually provide a production guidance. As an example, recently, the EPS of Atlanta started operating again quite consistently. We are producing today more than 20,000 barrels of oil equivalent daily. We have a schedule with some degree of flexibility in light of the authorizations, the expected authorizations to start up the FPSO Atlanta. The expectation is that the new FPSO will start its operation with 2 wells. For a while, this production will count on a parallel production of the early production system of Atlanta. Depending on the authorizations being obtained, as Mastrangelo mentioned, it is possible that the early production system of Atlanta will be producing from fewer wells because the campaign to transport, to relocate the wells to the new FPSO will follow the original plan. We designed for that. We prepared to have this kind of flexibility along the way. So it's very hard to forecast. As regards Manatee, the expectation presented by the operator of the field to resume the operation is until the end of Q3. We have an expectation that Manatee will come back online, presenting consistent production, consistent with the numbers delivered in 2023. So it's very hard to give you a precise number. Coupled with that, we have the completion of Parque das Conchas underway. Now that's pending authorization from the regulatory bodies. And the same goes for the partner at Atlanta with a 20% working interest. So we're not providing specific production guidance, but these are the main drivers to guide your estimates along the second half of the year. For 2025, the company publishes as a recurrent fashion the certificate of reserves, and that's the potential production of its fields. And there is no change regarding these plans. These are officially published. You can access the Investor Relations website to have a reference. Perfect, Pedro, that's already very helpful. And I want to have a quick follow-up question. Let's imagine a scenario where IBAMA and ANP become hurdles and you haven't got authorizations for the end of the year. That's the extreme scenario. Can you grow production, or in order to grow these 20,000 barrels daily, do you need authorizations for that? At Atlanta Field specifically from now till year end, if the new FPSO hypothetical scenarios you mentioned, if the new FPSO does not start operating until year end, the probability is that production will be lower because the schedule to move from the EPS to the new system that will follow the plan. Okay, thank you very much. We are not considering, but Mastrangelo was telling me, we are not considering this extreme scenario. If I may add, Bruno, this extreme scenario is not in our radar because we haven't got any conditions pending at IBAMA. The whole signaling is that there's not going to be a hurdle for August. The remaining condition with A and P, well, all of these are consolidated already. We know the requirements, so it's just a matter of how long they will take to respond. With the A and P strike, this formal communication system would take 30 days. So two of those requests would take 30 days, and that would extend to September. But if they resume normal operation, this delay wouldn't happen, and there's no extreme scenario of not obtaining the licenses till the end of the year. And in phase two, as you asked, the goal of phase two is to maintain production at the FPSO, maintaining the level of production for longer. But going back to the question asked by Gabriel and Pedro, just reminded me, I want to add to the answer regarding capital allocation. In the second quarter, we bought more shares of 3R. So that's a move in terms of adequate capital allocation. I don't know whether Pedro wants to add to that. The capital allocation and dividend policy will be discussed, approached, and decided by the new board of directors. Just as an illustration, among capital allocation alternatives for the company in the second half, we have a free cash flow. A relevant part of it was reinvested in buying shares of 3R, 2.5%. So this is an indication of how the company is navigating its capital allocation over time, trying to have a use of resources that is as efficient as possible. Thank you.
Next question, Regis Cardoso with XP. Please go ahead. Hello, Décio, Pedro, Mastrangelo. Thank you for taking my questions. There are two topics that I would like to address, and maybe I know there are some restrictions about the post-integration process, but since it starts tomorrow, well, Décio, there will be a post-merger integration process, and I understand that usually this phase entails a schedule with important milestones and a critical path. As external observers, we think about the performance of production curves and operational plans and capture of synergies. Naturally, it entails the organization of the structure of the company, agreement, reorganization, suppliers, a number of things that I believe you have mapped before. So all you can share with us to better understand the integration would be very interesting. Now, my second question is about the arrival of FPSO Atlanta. What is necessary by IBAMA is an on-site visit. Would like to better understand the risks behind it. Do you know if IBAMA has been performing these visits with other operators, or if this activity could be impacted or by the strike? And the second thing is about the critical path, ANP. Mastrangelo mentioned a response within 30 days. So the worst scenario would be additionally 30 days as of August and a potential impact. But A strike was also considered in ANP, and I believe this would be outside the scope of 30 days. I would just like to understand what might happen in the future. Thank you. Thank you, Regis. When it comes to the first question, we talked about synergies before and also about execution, performance. I'm not going back to it right now. First thing we'll do is to understand the portfolio, the combined portfolio of both companies, and assess the assets and work on an action plan. It would be too early to say anything, but undoubtedly, I can say, like I've said before, our main goal there is to perform and deliver results. And this goes through delivering Atlanta, and then next, delivering production in Papa-Terra and 3R fields in order to have a critical look on what we have in our hands and truly manage to turn the page and keep on delivering production for the coming years. So the very first initiative on our end is to work on diagnosis to plan our execution. What about Atlanta? Like Mastrangelo said before, well, actually, let me turn it over to him. You had a good interpretation, is precisely what you said. We don't see any hurdles, any difficulties about this visit, and this is pretty much in line with the sequence for the operating license with IBAMA. As for ANP, owing to this move in ANP and this 30-day time of response, you had a good reading. Our interpretation is that 2 interactions would be enough. Naturally, it would be very fast, even faster if the strike comes to an end in 1 week. But if that's not the case, not being the case, maybe 2 visits would be enough. We would have to monitor it closely. You mentioned the general strike that is scheduled for the coming days. This may impact the 30-day time frame, but this is limited. As far as we know, these will take only a couple of days. So the global scenario, this is the picture of the circumstance. Perfect, thank you. And I second everyone and wishing you good luck and lots of success in your next steps. We'll be following you up. Thank you. Thank you. Next question, Vicente Falanga with BBI. Please go ahead. Good afternoon. Décio, Mastrangelo, Pedro, thank you for taking my questions. My first question, I would like to have more color on West Lawn. How can this company contribute in performance for the new company? And also, what's the reason behind the choice? Well, they were the buyers, okay, but what's behind that? Second question, Mastrangelo, I'm sorry to go back to this topic, but benefiting from your presence, you talked about Papa-Terra with a big potential as a reservoir. 3R was already emphasizing this. I would like to understand if it's possible to run this asset in a stable manner, considering the infrastructure and the platform positioning on top of the reservoir, and considering maintenance that have been performed both subsea and also topside. Thank you. Thank you, Vicente. Well, 3R's call will be later, I guess, but let us try to answer your question. West Lawn is a company made up of veterans in the industry, people who have a long-standing tradition in the industry and also in Brazil, in independent companies, US companies. So our industry production entails an association. Once you start a project, it's very hard to pinpoint a production and exploration project that from the start is not a fruit of partnerships. Atlanta is an example. We started with a partnership with Petrobras, Shell, and other companies, and then we acquired it with Baja and OGX. And then, owing to legal issues, they left, and we had 100% of the asset in a development process. But this is not something conventional. It's always good to dilute risks and potential premium as well. West Lawn embarked later on in the project when we were already moving forward in the development project, and the price to be paid is what we see. In addition to winning the process of being awarded in the entry in Atlanta, because we had discussions with other companies, they add this expertise that we value so much, and we can and will adopt it. For instance, the development in Oliva and other opportunities that we have in the rinks fence of Atlanta. And we do not exclude having them as partners in other future initiatives in the new company. Mastrangelo, would you like to add anything about Papa-Terra? Vicente, I cannot disclose much. We'll have to wait a little longer, at least one day, to talk about the new company. But I can tell my feelings about it. When I joined Enauta, well, you mentioned many things about Papa-Terra, and when I joined Enauta, Atlanta also had its challenges. Working on a project like this at that time was a huge step, but we were confident and we moved forward. And you mentioned a list of items, important items behind these challenges. Just like I saw in the past, for each one of them, I envisage opportunities for the future. Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Looking forward for the company's ramp up.
The Q&A session has come to an end. I would like to turn the floor to Mr. Décio Oddoni for his final remarks. Very well. Thank you very much to all of you for joining us in this video conference call. Like I said, this is the last conference call of Enauta as Enauta, and I hope to see you in the future video conference calls of the future company, Pedro Mastrangelo, and I hope to be present. Thank you very much again. I apologize for the slight delay at the beginning, and thank you very much. And now this video conference call has come to an end. We would like to thank you all for your participation and have a great day.